I was just an ordinary doctor until one bolt of lightning struck me, stopped my heart, and changed everything forever.
You know, life has a funny way of throwing you curveballs. One minute, you're just a regular guy going about your ordinary day, totally convinced you know how the world works. The next, well, the next, you're not just not a regular guy anymore, you're not even in the world you thought you knew. For me, that curveball didn't just change my life. It literally brought me to the brink of the beyond and back, carrying a melody I never asked for a symphony from the sky. It all happened in a single deafening flash, a moment that tore my reality apart and stitched it back together with the most unexpected, beautiful, and sometimes terrifying music. Before that day, back in 1994, my life was for all intents and purposes entirely predictable. I was Tony Cicoria, a board-certified orthopedic surgeon. My days were a meticulous dance of diagnosis surgery and patient care. I had trained hard for this, a BS in biology from the Citadel, followed by an MD and PhD from the Medical University of South Carolina, then residency at the University of Virginia. I was chief of orthopedics at Chenango Memorial Hospital in New York and a clinical assistant professor at SUNY Upstate Medical School in Syracuse. My career was my focus, my passion, my identity. I was a practical man grounded in the tangible, the verifiable, the scientific. If you couldn't see it, touch it, or measure it, it probably wasn't real to me. My world was bones and muscles, nerves and tissues. I was robust, fit, a former college football player, a man of solid physical presence. My personal life was just as unadorned. I lived in Oneonta, New York, with my family raising 3 kids who were growing up fast, and music was background noise. I was a child of the 60s, so my taste gravitated towards classic rock. The thought of classical piano, it held absolutely no interest for me. I'd had a few piano lessons as a boy, my mother's idea, but I quickly abandoned them. I found them tedious, preferring to be outside fishing, playing sports, anything but sitting at a keyboard. A piano in my house, unimaginable. I certainly didn't own one. I was perfectly content with my life, with its clear boundaries, its logical progression, its scientific explanations. I had a good job, a family, a routine. I was comfortable. I was in control, or so I thought. That fateful day, August of 1994, started as any other beautiful summer day at Sleepy Hollow Lake in Athens, New York. It was a family reunion, my in-laws celebrating their annual group birthday gathering. About 20 relatives were there, kids running around screaming, playing. I was busy preparing the barbecue at the lakeside pavilion. It was pleasant, breezy, but I remember noticing a few storm clouds gathering in the distance, a slight sprinkle of rain beginning to fall. Nothing to worry about, I figured, just a passing shower. A sudden thought occurred to me, I should call my mother just to check in. This was 1994, before cell phones became ubiquitous, so I walked around the building to the outdoor payphone. I dialed her familiar number, letting it ring 8 times. No answer. I pulled the handset away from my face with my left hand, about to hang up when it happened. A deafening crack. A brilliant flash of light exploded from the phone handset I was holding. It hit me directly in the face. I didn't just see it, I felt it. A massive electrical charge, a bolt of lightning that had struck the pavilion, traversed right through the phone and into me, racing to the ground. The force was unbelievable. My body was instantly, violently thrown backward like a rag doll. And then something utterly inexplicable happened. As my physical body was launched backwards, I felt myself, my conscious self, my me, move forward instead. I was suddenly standing motionless, bewildered, staring at the phone still dangling there. Nothing made sense. My mother-in-law screamed from the top of the stairs, rushing down towards what she saw. I saw her looking past me, headed in a direction that bewildered me. I turned to see where she was going, and that's when I saw it. Lying motionless on the ground about 10 feet behind me was a body, and to my utter astonishment, that body was me. A woman who had been waiting to use the phone, an intensive care unit nurse, dropped to her knees and immediately began administering CPR. I could see her, hear the commotion, the panicked voices. I tried to speak to them, to tell them I was fine, but they couldn't see or hear me. I could see and hear everything they did and said. It was at this cosmic, profoundly surreal moment that I realized I was still thinking. I was still reasoning. My mental vernacular, my self-awareness, was entirely intact. And then the thought, simple and blunt, pierced through the shock, "Holy shit, I'm dead." This wasn't a dream. This wasn't a hallucination. This was real. My consciousness, my very self, was no longer tethered to that lifeless body on the ground. And what was truly remarkable was the lack of emotion. I was shocked, certainly, but otherwise I felt no reaction to what should have been the most emotional of life's events. Seeing no point in hovering over my body, my thoughts drifted, and I started to move away. I turned towards the stairs where I knew my family still was. As I ascended, looking down, as I normally would, I saw my legs begin to dissolve by the third step. It was disconcerting, this gradual loss of form. By the time I reached the top of the stairs, I had lost all physical shape. I was no longer a body. I was just a ball of pure energy and thought. My mind was racing frantically, trying to comprehend, to record, to make sense of this impossible reality. Instead of bothering with the second flight of stairs, I simply passed through the wall into the room where everyone was. I floated diagonally across the room over my wife, who was painting children's faces. I saw my kids, and I had this clear, profound realization they would be okay. There was a dispassionate certainty to it, an understanding that everything would unfold as it should. Then I departed from the building. Once outside, I was enveloped. I was immersed in a bluish-white light, shimmering as if I were swimming underwater in a crystal-clear stream with sunlight piercing through it. This visual was accompanied by a sensation that transcended anything I had ever known. It was a feeling of absolute love and peace. What does absolute mean in this context? Think of absolute zero in science, a singular pure state where no molecular motion exists. That's what this felt like. I had fallen into a pure positive flow of energy. I could see this energy flowing through the very fabric of everything measurable, palpable. As I flowed in this current, which had both velocity and direction, scenes from my life began to flash by, both high points and low points, but nothing in depth, just snippets. There was no emotion associated with these, just pure thought, pure ecstasy. I felt myself accelerating, being drawn up, pulled towards something glorious. It was a feeling of profound exhilaration. I was aware of every single moment, conscious of every millisecond, even though I knew with absolute certainty that time itself did not exist in this realm. I remember thinking with a clarity that still resonates today, this is the greatest thing that can ever happen to anyone. In that realm of pure consciousness, bathed in that light, I understood things I could never have grasped with my logical, scientific mind. I saw that my consciousness, that me that had left my body, was not merely a product of my brain. It was independent, eternal. The brain, I realized, might just be a vessel, a filter, giving us access only to the thoughts and perceptions essential for survival in the physical world. But when that filter is bypassed, when the brain is silenced, then perhaps it gains access to thoughts that until then were unavailable. A boundless realm of knowledge, of connection, of pure being. This experience, this undeniable journey beyond the physical, planted an unshakable conviction within me. My spirit, my conscious self, would live on forever. This wasn't wishful thinking or a drug-induced hallucination, as some might suggest. I was able to see and verify details of my near-death and out-of-body experience, things happening around my lifeless body, even things in another room, which I would have had no conceivable way of knowing except through the conscious travel of my spiritual self outside of my body. The case of Pam Reynolds, where a patient accurately described surgical instruments during brain-dead standstill surgery, resonated deeply with my own experience. How can science explain that, or a blind person reporting veridical perceptions during an NDE to simply dismiss my experience as a dying brain activity or a sudden burst of electrical surges felt profoundly inadequate? And the music. The music was part of that insight. It wasn't just random sounds. It felt like I had tuned into a frequency, and the music was downloaded into my head. It was as if through this gateway of death, a direct channel to a wellspring of creation had been opened within me. I truly felt it comes from heaven, as Mozart supposedly said. It was a gift, a grace, a blessing. Then, just as suddenly as I left, I was back. Slam! The sensation was jarring, brutal. The first thing I felt was excruciating pain. My mouth burned, and my left foot felt like a red-hot poker had been shoved through my ankle. Only bodies have pain, I realized, and I was firmly back in mine. I was still unconscious initially, but I could feel the nurse stop CPR and kneel beside me. For minutes it seemed I struggled to open my eyes. I wanted to tell her, "Thank you for helping me." But all that came out was a nonsensical, delirious declaration. "It's okay, I'm a doctor." She replied, "A few minutes ago you weren't." Camp security arrived wanting to call an ambulance. To their frustration, I refused. I wasn't thinking clearly, but I still had that sense that, with lightning strikes, you're either alive or dead, there's not much in between. My family drove me the 2.5 hours home to Oneonta, NY, wobbly and confused. I eventually saw my local cardiologist and neurologist. They ran all the appropriate tests and examinations, found nothing amiss, and simply told me how lucky I was to be alive. I resumed work 2 weeks later, when my brain seemed to function normally again. For a while I had some lingering memory problems, occasionally forgetting names of rare diseases or surgical procedures. But all my surgical skills remained unimpaired, and within another 2 weeks my memory returned to normal. I thought that was it. The incident was over. My life had seemingly returned to normal. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. What happened next still fills me with amazement even now, decades later. About 2 to 3 weeks after the lightning strike, a new sensation began to emerge. Slowly at first, over a period of 2 or 3 days, I became aware of an insatiable desire to listen to piano music. This was completely alien to me. I had zero interest in classical music before. I listened to rock music. Yet suddenly I had an overwhelming craving for it. Living in rural New York, I had to drive an hour to Albany just to find classical piano CDs. When I walked into the music store, it was as if a CD of Vladimir Ashkenazy playing Chopin's favorites simply flew into my hands. I bought it, took it home, and listened to it repeatedly, incessantly throughout the day. I became especially enamored of the military polonaise, the winter wind etude, the black key etude, the A-flat polonaise, and the B-flat minor scherzo. Within 2 weeks, a new, even stronger urge gripped me. I had to learn to play this music. This was problematic, as I didn't own a piano and remembered absolutely nothing from my childhood lessons. But then, as if by another miracle, our babysitter asked if she could store her old upright piano at our house for a year. Just like that, I had a piano. I immediately bought beginner's books and ordered all the sheet music from the Chopin CD. My fingers felt stiff, awkward, after more than 30 years since my boyhood lessons. But I started to teach myself. And then the dreams began. A few months after the piano arrived, I had a vivid dream unlike any other. It felt like an out-of-body experience within a dream. I saw myself sitting at a piano performing in a concert hall dressed in a tux. The music I was playing, it wasn't Chopin, it was my own. I listened intently, and as the music swelled to a crescendo, it woke me from a sound sleep. It was 3:15 a.m., but the music didn't stop. It continued to play vividly in my head for a long time. I jumped out of bed, rushed to the piano, and tried desperately to play some of what I heard, but I had no idea how to write music, let alone play it properly. Frustrated, I went back to bed. From that moment on, it was relentless. Whenever I sat down to play the piano, the music from my dream, my music would start playing in my head like a recording. If I tried to ignore it, it became more insistent. It had a very powerful presence. It would come and take me over. I became obsessed with the piano and came to believe the only reason I survived the lightning strike was for this music. My schedule transformed. I would practice from 4:00 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. before work, then work my 12-hour shift. After giving our kids their baths and tucking them into bed with a goodnight song, I was back at the piano sometimes until my eyes couldn't focus anymore. Every day I'd try to write down a few notes, a few measures of my music, and stash them away in a drawer for later use. I quickly realized my self-teaching was inadequate. In 1998, I began formal lessons with Sandra Campbell McCain, a Juilliard graduate and professor of music at Hartwick College. Annually, I'd spend a week at Sonata Piano Camp in Bennington, Vermont, immersing myself in music, making my debut as a musician. My playing, said one attendee, was with great passion, great brio, an astounding feat for someone with virtually no musical background. In 2006, a pivotal moment arrived. Through a complex sequence of events, I was introduced to Dr. Oliver Sacks, the renowned neurologist and author. He was writing his book, Musicophilia: Tales of Music and the Brain. And my story, of course, was fascinating to him. He featured me in a 2007 New Yorker article and his book. We debated the nature of my NDE, he, the scientist, suggesting brain manifestations and neural circuitry under insult. I, the experiencer, convinced of consciousness beyond the physical. Yet despite our differing interpretations, he understood the profound imperative of the music. As we shook hands goodbye one day, he looked right into my eyes, as if looking through me, and said something that changed everything. The music from the dream went through an awful lot of trouble to get here. The least you can do is write it. His words resonated deeply. I went home and immediately bought a Sibelius music writing program. For the next 7 months, I wrote frantically every day after work, piecing together bits and pieces of an original composition. Oliver Sacks's book came out in 2007, drawing a lot of interest to my unusual story. And on October 12, 2007, I debuted my first piano composition, Rhapsody Opus 1, what later became known as my Lightning Sonata, in Westport, Connecticut. My public debut followed in January 2008 at the Goodrich Theatre in Oneonta, New York. This performance was recorded live by Granada Media UK BBC One and German National Television. My music was recorded on a CD entitled Notes from an Accidental Pianist. I've since appeared in various magazines and television presentations around the world. I'm also working on a book about my experience called On the Other Side of Life. The transformation wasn't just musical. The NDE prompted a profound personal shift. I became far more empathetic with a new approach to life. I reevaluated my professional ambitions, realizing that moving down the path of academia, publishing articles, and organizing orthopedic spine meetings was no longer that important. I let go of some of those things, prioritizing human connection and understanding. For a long time, my pursuit of the music was almost a destructive element of my NDE. I was so convinced it was the only reason I survived that I pursued it with a vengeance at the cost of my marriage and time with my kids. But over time, I've found a balance. I still practice orthopedic surgery part-time in Damariscotta, Maine now. I've learned to integrate this extraordinary gift into my life rather than letting it consume it. When Oliver Sacks wanted to do further brain scans to define the neurological basis of my musicophilia, I initially assented, but then reconsidered. I told him perhaps it was best to let things be. I knew what I knew. I didn't need a brain scan to confirm the dramatic alteration of my life. My conscious self never wavered, even while I was clinically dead. Now I also talk to people who've had NDEs or those terminally ill patients grappling with fear of death. I tell them what I experienced was real, a place of love and peace, and that they're not crazy. I reassure them that what they experienced was real and not their imagination. My journey began with a single devastating bolt of lightning, but it opened a doorway to something far grander than I could have ever imagined. It stripped away my preconceived notions, my grounded scientific certainties, and showed me a truth that transcends the physical. I no longer fear death. Absolutely not. Because I've been to the other side, and I know it's not something we are supposed to be afraid of. This experience has taught me that life is far greater than the sum of its physical parts. That consciousness, whatever it truly is, somehow survives death. It's a gift, a blessing, a profound realization that opens up a realm of possibility that most of us in our busy logical lives never dare to consider. We need to be open to these experiences to validate what others see and feel, especially what small children perceive, because they often have a clearer view of that other side. The music that found me, that downloaded into my head from that other realm, is a constant reminder of this profound truth. It's a tangible echo of an intangible journey. It's a testament to the fact that there are frequencies, dimensions, and understandings far beyond our current grasp. And perhaps the most important lesson of all is to embrace the unexpected, to listen to the silent symphonies within, and to understand that even in the face of apparent oblivion, there is an enduring melody, a persistent light, and an eternal absolute peace. What a blessing, what a grace, and what a life.